All right, welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Absolutely, always ready to explore.
Awesome. So today we're tackling something pretty big, something that's been pondered, debated, argued over for centuries. We're diving into the world of sin and virtue.
Sin and virtue. Heavy stuff.
It is. And we've got these excerpts here, really fascinating stuff, really gets into it. The origins of these ideas, what purpose they serve, and even whether they still hold up in our modern world.
Right, because are these concepts, are they like timeless truths or are they, just constructs that we've kind of created to make sense of the world?
Exactly. And that's what we're going to try to figure out today. So let's jump right in. I mean, the excerpt starts off, it's interesting. Right off the bat, it jumps into the why of these concepts. Why do they even exist?
Yeah, the why.
And it highlights a few things: moral frameworks, religious influence, even psychological and evolutionary roles. I mean, it seems like these ideas of sin and virtue, they serve a lot of different purposes.
They really do. And it makes you think, right? Like, why do we even need these concepts in the first place?
Okay, so let's break that down. Let's start with moral frameworks. What's the deal with that?
Well, when you think about it, moral frameworks, they act like almost like a glue that holds societies together. It's how communities, how they establish shared values and norms and it's like a blueprint for cooperation, right? Make sure everyone's kind of on the same page.
Oh, I see. Yeah, that makes sense. So virtues basically become the behaviors that, like, benefit the group,
Yeah.
and sins, well, those are the actions that are harmful or disruptive, right?
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head. And the excerpt even brings up some interesting examples from ancient Rome.
Ancient Rome, okay.
Yeah, like courage and justice were considered super important virtues, right?
Yeah.
Crucial for maintaining order and strength within the Roman Republic. They didn't mess around.
Yeah, I can see that. It all makes sense, right?
Yeah.
We need some sort of framework to live together. But then you can't ignore the religious aspect of this whole thing.
Oh, absolutely. Religion plays a huge role in shaping these ideas of sin and virtue. I mean, in many religions, these concepts, they're directly tied to a higher power, to divine will.
Okay, so elaborate on that a little bit.
Sure. So sin becomes an act of defiance against that higher power, right? While virtue is seen as aligning yourself with it. And this concept, it pops up across various faiths. Think about the Ten Commandments in Judaism and Christianity, or the concept of karma in Hinduism and Buddhism.
Right, right. It's fascinating how these ideas, they transcend specific religion.
Definitely. And the excerpt doesn't stop there. It goes even deeper, bringing up the psychological and evolutionary roles of these concepts.
That's what I was thinking about before. Like, that's where it gets super interesting for me.
Yeah, it is fascinating. Like, imagine, right, early humans living in really challenging environments, tribes that had higher levels of trust. And trust is a virtue. They would be more likely to share resources, more likely to survive those harsh conditions,
In
right?
that sense, yeah.
So it's like virtues like compassion and honesty, which build trust and cooperation, they might actually have an evolutionary advantage.
Wow, I never thought about it like that.
Yeah.
So these concepts, sin and virtue, they could be linked to our survival as a species. That's mind-blowing.
Yes.
But then, okay, here's the big question, the question that just keeps popping up. Are sin and virtue, like, truly legitimate?
Mm.
Or are they just constructs we've created just to function as a society? Like, how do we know?
No, you're getting to the heart of the matter. The excerpt, it tackles this head on, explores religious, philosophical, even secular perspectives on this whole question.
I think it was the secular perspective that really stood out to me. Can we talk about that a bit more?
Sure, the secular perspective basically sees sin and virtue as social constructs, right?
Hmm.
They might be useful for maintaining order, keeping things running smoothly, but they're not necessarily based on some, absolute truth.
I see. So it's acknowledging the human tendency to label things, to
Yeah.
categorize actions as good or bad, but it's challenging that idea of a universal moral code, like who decides what's good or bad.
Exactly. And that's where the critics come in, right? They argue that if sin and virtue are just based on cultural norms or personal beliefs, then morality becomes super fluid, almost arbitrary. Like what's right for one person or culture could be wrong for another.
Right. So then you run into the whole moral relativism thing,
Mm.
and that could be a slippery slope. But then, I mean, how do we reconcile all of this? On one hand, we've got this practical need for these concepts, for social cohesion. But then on the other hand, there's this lingering question of whether they actually hold any real weight, like objectively.
Mm.
What do we do with that?
The excerpt emphasizes that there are no easy answers here. It's complex. Philosophically, things get even more diverse. Take Aristotle, for example. He believed that virtues were essential for achieving what he called eudaimonia, It's a Greek word that essentially means human flourishing, like a life well lived.
So living virtuously, according to Aristotle, it's actually in our own best interest. It's not just about following rules, it's about living a good life.
Exactly. It's about cultivating these qualities through reason and habit to live a fulfilling life.
Hmm.
But then you have thinkers like Sartre, the existentialist. He believed that we create our own meaning, our own morality, essentially rejecting any kind of predetermined code of sin and virtue. So his philosophy throws that whole idea of universal morals into question.
It's amazing how all these different ideas, they've shaped our world, shaped how we think about right and wrong.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it seems like the legitimacy of sin and virtue, it really boils down to individual belief systems. And that's why I keep coming back to like this idea of subjective morality. If there is no absolute truth, how do we even make ethical decisions? What are we supposed to use as our guide?
Oh, yeah.
That's what I'm wrestling with here.
And that's the question, isn't it? The question we all have to grapple with. We've done this deep dive. We've explored the origins of these ideas, the different interpretations, the ways they shape societies, influence religions, even connect to our evolutionary past. But understanding this complexity, I think it allows us to have a more nuanced approach to the whole thing. It's not just about blindly accepting or rejecting these concepts. It's about really engaging with them on a deeper level, thinking critically.
So, okay, what does all of this mean for our listeners? Like, we've gone on this journey, explored all this complex stuff, but where do we go from here?
Well, maybe the real takeaway, maybe it's that question you just raised. If sin and virtue, if they are truly subjective, how do we navigate a world without those absolute moral markers? How do we decide what's right and wrong?
And what does that mean for our personal values, for the choices we make every single day? Wow. Yeah. That's a powerful thought. A lot to ponder there. And I think, it's not about finding easy answers. It's about continuing to explore these questions, continuing to learn, continuing to shape our own understanding of morality, of right and wrong.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. It's been quite a journey. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.